SCP, Roblox. Yeah, I'm not going to give you some long drawn-out intro here. Odds are you know what SCP is and you know what Roblox is. We're going over SCP Roblox games. Got it? Alright. Now in the past I've done a few tier lists, but those were both very unscripted and very messy. So this video I want to have a more concrete rating system. So I'll be rating each game on a 30-point rating system, and then using that score to give it a tier based on this chart. Now, you might be asking why a 30-point system? Well, it's actually 3 separate 10-point rating scales combined into one final score. The first scale is gameplay. Is it fun? Do I want to come back and play it some more? Or is it frustrating to play, or even worse, boring? The next scale is atmosphere, which includes both visuals and sound, including music. A game with great atmosphere will always be enjoyable to play, so I felt like this should stand on its own as its own scale. And lastly, we have the SCP score. Now, let me be very clear, this is not just about accuracy to the source material, although that is typically important. It's about how it uses the SCP universe and its various anomalous objects to create a fun and engaging gameplay experience. I do not think that every SCP game needs to be 100% faithful to the lore. For example, let's take SCP-106 in Secret Lab. In the SCP-106 article, it mentions that direct physical damage appears to have no effect on SCP-106. Not being able to damage 106 at all with your guns would just be a completely terrible gameplay decision, so instead they gave him a damage resistance to bullets. This kind of balanced decision would not lessen the SCP score, but rather increase it. It's a smart workaround that doesn't stray too far from the lore. So, that's how my rating system works. I asked my community recently for some good SCP games on Roblox, and they gave me lots of suggestions, most of which I'll be going over in this video. But a comment I saw a lot was something along the lines of, "Oh, this one is really good, but the rest of them are terrible, or not worth playing," which seemed odd to me. So I also went looking for some more popular ones that weren't mentioned, and we'll get to those ones. Lastly, I just want to say that I'm not trying to crap on anyone's game here. Game development is not easy, even when it comes to Roblox games. I seek to give constructive criticism based on the merits of the game in question. However, SCP is something I care about, and if it seems like you're trying to make a quick buck off of slapping SCP onto some mediocre game, I'm gonna let you know how I feel about that. Now, with all that being said, let's get into it. And we'll start with the most popular one. Yes, that one. SCP-3008 as a concept is pretty brilliant. If you've ever been to an IKEA, you know how easy it is to get lost. Or, so I've heard. I've actually never been to an IKEA. Anyway, they took that concept and turned it into a rather horrific scenario. SCP-3008 is an IKEA store. Once you go inside, and once you lose sight of the entrance, you'll be transported seamlessly to SCP-3008-1, which is a seemingly infinite IKEA interior with no exit in sight. Now, technically there are exits in the lore, but not in-game for obvious reasons. The goal is to survive, not to escape, and if they added exits in-game, then all people would try to do was escape. Anyway, back to the story. The employees, labeled SCP-3008-2, though we'll just call them employees, are faceless and disproportionate humans that roam the store during the day. But when nighttime comes, the lights turn off, and they become violent, asking you to leave. Survivors who find themselves in SCP-3008-1 use the furniture to build forts to protect themselves from the employees. Honestly, it's almost as if this concept was made to be turned into a video game. It's so perfect. Now, let's get into the review of the game. I've actually already done a review in my Root Review series, which is now unlisted, and quite a bit has changed over the years. Hey guys, welcome to the second episode of Root Reviews, the series where I take a look at top-rated front-page games and see what all the hype is about. Yeah, that's enough of that. The gameplay is exactly as described in the story. At daytime, the lights are on, and the employees roam the store randomly. You can pick up objects and place them down in various different orientations, the goal being to build a base to protect yourself at night. You can also set waypoints so you don't forget where your base is. There's 3 status bars. Energy, which depletes very slowly unless you run or slide, which both drain the energy bar faster. Once your energy bar reaches 0, you won't be able to sprint anymore. Once your hunger bar reaches 0, you'll start taking damage. You can also take damage by being attacked by employees or taking fall damage. Or, of course, drinking 2-liter Dr. Bob. Speaking of that, the way to replenish these bars is with consumables. Medkits, food, drinks. These consumables spawn in certain locations on certain days. This handy guide from the 3008 wiki shows which events happen on which days. You'll probably also notice the Foggy Day / Blood Night events, which spice things up a bit. Each day actually has a unique music track that you can actually use to keep track of the time, and you can use that to figure out when the next food respawn is coming if you have a keen ear. The nights last approximately 5 minutes, while the days last approximately 6 minutes. The short-term goal in this game is just to survive. But once you have a base built and a consistent source of food, survival becomes trivial. So the more long-term goal, of course, becomes building the coolest base possible. And in my opinion, this is where the game really shines. Honestly, it goes from a horror game to a sandbox game. People have built some really cool bases throughout the history of this game. You have plenty of different options for creating and furnishing your base, and some rarer items to seek out if you want to have them for your base. Or if you want, you can try to build as high as you can, and the music even changes if you go high enough. So, what's the score? Well, let's start with the gameplay. I'll give it a 7 out of 10. My biggest issue with the gameplay is that the nights are long and boring, and the game isn't actually that scary, despite being a horror game. Besides the first night when you don't have a base, you don't really ever feel in danger in this game. Let's talk about the employees for a bit, because they can be quite interesting. And you know what, I'll actually just let these clips speak for themselves.
Excuse me, the store is now closed. Please exit the building. Excuse me, the store is now closed. Please exit the building. Excuse me, the store is now closed. Please exit the building. Excuse me.
Unless you're playing really risky or really dumb, you're basically never in danger of dying to the employees. I like mechanics like the whistle, in theory, which shows where the nearest employees are while alerting them to where you are. It's a cool trade-off that can pay off if you really need to know a good escape route. Or at least it would be if the nights were actually challenging or scary. However, as I said earlier, this game really shines when it comes to the building aspects. I love making my base feel like a home. The building system feels really smooth and responsive, making it really fun to build things. I think the survival mechanics are pretty well tuned. At least twice a week you'll have to go out and get some food, which is how often the food respawns. Although in normal gameplay you're really not gonna run out of hunger unless you're really neglecting your hunger bar. Let's talk about the atmosphere. I give it a 9 out of 10. The furniture is well modeled, the lights look good, especially at night, which is when they need to look good. The little novelty items you can find around the store add a nice charm to the game, as well as the death messages, which are pretty funny. The sound that plays when the day-night cycle changes is nice and loud. The sound when placing objects is also very satisfying, and increases the fun of building.
Nice.
But where this game really wins big in this category is the music. Having original music for every single day is really cool, and I especially love the Foggy Day theme. As I mentioned, there's a song that plays when you get high up enough, but there's also a separate theme for when you get to the top. It's called, oh boy, a pyrophobic summit. Did I say that right? I hope so. Apeirophobia is described as the fear of the infinite, the eternal, the unending, and the summit is the end of a journey. Kind of paradoxical, but it's a cool phrase. By getting to the top of the map, you realize just how infinite this nightmare is, and I think it's a really neat touch. A touch of something I think is somewhat missed out on in this game. Something lost from the original SCP-3008 article. The despair of being trapped inside this place. The cheery music is iconic, along with the novelty items and the death messages. As I mentioned earlier, I think they add a nice charm to the game, but ultimately they do kind of take away from the horror of this game. The existential horror of living inside SCP-3008-1. But I am glad there is a bit of it when you finally get to the top. And don't get me wrong, like I said, I absolutely do love those little whimsical touches, but I just wish there was more on the horror side to balance it out. But again, 9 out of 10, I think the atmosphere in this game is really, really good. Just not quite perfect. Finally, the SCP score. When you only cover one SCP, it's a lot easier to get things right, but it still doesn't quite get a perfect score. I'll give it a 9 though. The one thing I really wish it had more of was details from the journal section of the original article, such as employees tearing away at the walls of settlements and people crafting makeshift weapons to defend themselves from the employees. Come to think of it, that's something that could actually improve the gameplay score too, a crafting system. That would also solve the issue of having nothing to do at night because you could spend the night crafting things. Maybe make it so that crafting things takes a long time so you're incentivized to do it at night when you have nothing better to be doing. And have a mechanic where the employees can rip down parts of your base during the night if they spot you, making it so that you have to focus on defense and rebuilding during the day. The employees in the story aren't so strong just because they're anomalous. In fact, it's actually suggested they might have similar endurance to humans. The big reason why they managed to overtake human settlements is because the employees have a massive number advantage. More and more just seem to show up over time. And I just wish more of these aspects of the story were reflected in-game. Now, I am well aware that these are things that not everyone wants in the game, especially the developer. And don't get me wrong, I think the game is great as it is, but I think if these things were implemented well, I really think they could elevate it to be a masterpiece. Honestly, I think this game would be perfect if they leaned more into the survival/horror game aspects of it. However, as it is, it's still a great SCP game. 25 out of 30, A tier. This sets a good precedent for games going forward, as it shows what a great SCP game looks like while still leaving room for improvement. This one has a lot of different moving parts and mechanics, so let's start with the basics and move from there. SCP Site-76 Prison Anomalies is a game that takes place inside an SCP site, and one that hosts many dangerous anomalies. Players can either start off by working for the Foundation or start off as a prisoner. As you'll soon come to find out, I'm not a huge fan of when games avoid using official terminology, like saying prisoner instead of D-Class or anomalies instead of SCPs. I mean, it's not like the SCP Foundation people are just gonna copyright strike you. Everything SCP related is under Creative Commons. You don't have to use fake names. And I should really be saving this rant for the SCP score section, so let's move on. There are additional roles. You can become Chaos Insurgency by escaping as Class D, or you can select them right away if you have a Game Pass. Then there's the Marshall Carter Dark Agent role, which has been coming soon for at least a couple years now. Lastly, you can play as anomalies by walking up to their chamber and either paying in-game cash or Robux to become that anomaly. Each role has its own set of tools, objectives, alliances, and complications, so let's go over them one by one, starting with the Prisoner, since that's the one I have the most experience with. Anyone familiar with Jailbreak will be very familiar with this kind of experience. You start off in a prison cell. After a few seconds, you'll be let out. Your main goal is to escape by any means necessary, and there are a few things stopping you from doing that, primarily the Foundation. If they catch you doing something bad, you can be arrested. These offenses include picking up weapons, pickpocketing guards, attacking guards, going outside the boundaries of where you're allowed to be, and more. And much like Jailbreak, there are plenty of people in life who get their sick kicks out of playing as guards and following prisoners around until they break the rules, promptly arresting them. Luckily for the prisoners, there are plenty of ways to escape. Back here, there's a shop where you can buy various things. Key cards, which unlock various doors throughout the facility, are relatively cheap, while weapons are not. There's also a disguise kit, which will make you appear as another player, though you can only buy one of poor quality here. Wait, what do you mean that's the wrong game? Oh! All factions have access to disguise kits, and they can be used to trick people of other factions. Chaos will use it to disguise as Foundation members so they can sneak into the facility, while Foundation members will use the disguise kit to trick prisoners into thinking it's safe to break the rules around them, which is just a really lame way to play the game in my opinion, but what can you do? Money can be earned in various ways depending on your role. There's stacks of money laying around the prison for some reason, which can be picked up for various amounts of money. As Prisoner or Chaos Insurgency, you can get money from releasing anomalies, which, side note here, releasing anomalies is different from playing as an anomaly. Releasing anomalies means an NPC of that anomaly will start walking around, and gives you money, while becoming an anomaly costs money. Another way to earn money is by sabotaging the Foundation's systems, but that usually amounts to a few pennies. One of the better ways to make money as a prisoner is contract killing. These posters hanging up around the facility can be used to start contract missions to kill Foundation members. They'll get an alert that someone is coming after them, and you'll get an icon telling you exactly where they are. But by far the best way of making money in this game is through heists, but we're gonna get into that when we get to the Chaos Insurgency section. Prisoners technically can do heists, but it's more encouraged for Chaos Insurgents to do that. Let's talk about escaping as a prisoner. You can be more sneaky, choosing to take secret routes to get out of the prison zone and stealthing your way to the exit. Or you can choose all-out war and shoot every Foundation member you see until you're at the exit. There's even a mechanic where you can start a prison riot, giving all prisoners weapon, armor, and a keycard. As you can imagine though, this is a very expensive option, so it doesn't happen very often. As you traverse through the facility, there are two different ways to get out. There's the main entrance, and then there's the light containment elevators. The light containment elevators are typically your best bet because the main entrance is usually bustling with Foundation members. Once you make it to the surface, you'll need to make your way to this exit, where you'll need a level 3 keycard to escape. Once you escape as a prisoner, you'll become a Chaos Insurgent. You'll still have all the same enemies as before, but now you're better equipped to deal with them. You start off as a Chaos Soldier, which spawns with an AK-47, medkit, level 5 keycard, ammo container, and bulletproof vest. There are other Chaos roles besides the Soldier, but I don't ever really see people using those. As CI, your goals are to help prisoners escape, sabotage the Foundation systems, like the power grid, and starting heists, which involve stealing anomalous objects from the Foundation. Heists are basically the best way of earning money in the game. They typically involve breaking into some sort of SCP chamber and stealing the anomalies from it, and then selling those anomalies to Marshall Carter Dark Agents. Yes, that's what they're called in-game. Now, I did put this in the Chaos section, but prisoners can also technically participate in heists. It's just that usually prisoners prioritize escaping over doing heists, because if you get shot while you're a prisoner, you go back to your prison cell, but if you get shot while you're a Chaos, you go back to the Chaos base. Now, it should be noted that if you get handcuffed as a Chaos, you'll actually get recaptured and become a Class D again, but they can only arrest you if you don't have your weapon out. They can make that happen by tasing you, so make sure to be extra careful around Foundation members or else you might get recaptured. It is much better to get shot than get tased. As a Foundation member, you have many different roles you can take on. Each Foundation role receives a wage, although the higher you are in the totem pole, the more money you earn. You could be a scientist and take prisoners with you and do tests on the various anomalies, but let's be honest, no one's doing that. Even if you wanted to, this game is really not made for that kind of gameplay. Even if it is an option, there's just not much to be gained from that. There's various levels of security. Each is armed with a weapon, handcuffs, and a taser. Higher levels of security even come with a disguise kit. And then there's the site director, who can broadcast messages to the whole facility and pick an employee of the month. In addition to your salary, you can also earn money as a Foundation member by going around repairing things that the Chaos or prisoners have destroyed. Or you can be that guy and go around arresting prisoners who break the rules. And another way to make money is to kill targets with a bounty on their head, which happens when a CI or prisoner either kills enough people or steals enough stuff. It'll even be announced to the whole server when a certain target reaches a certain bounty level. If enough anomalies have been breached and the warhead control has been activated, the warhead can be detonated. Once the countdown begins, all the facility's doors will open, and players will have a certain amount of time to either get to a blast shelter or escape, or else they'll die in the incoming explosion. This is generally a good time to escape as a prisoner, since all the Foundation members will be in the blast shelters and all the doors will be open. Just make sure you can make it to the exit in time. Whew, that was a lot to go over, and there is quite a bit I didn't mention or go super into detail about, either because it didn't seem like a super relevant mechanic or I just didn't have enough experience with it. This game has a lot of different mechanics, but having a lot of things to do does not necessarily make a game good, so what did I think of SCP Site-76 Prison Anomalies? It's alright. I'll give the gameplay a 5. Honestly, the most fun I had was just messing around. I played as an SCP once, and it was mildly fun. The thing is that each role just kind of gets boring to play for more than 20 minutes. The Chaos is definitely the best role, with all the different heists you can do, which are definitely a highlight of the game. Each heist is unique, features some actually decent gameplay mechanics, and is actually decently fun. The first time you do them. Like everything in this game, once I've done it once, I don't really feel like I need to experience it again. There's just not enough to keep me coming back to the things in this game. The combat is decent. Like, it's not offensively bad or anything, but you can find way better combat mechanics in other Roblox games. And let's be honest here, this game is basically Jailbreak with SCP slapped onto it. And another thing I have to address is the game passes. I don't mind games having game passes necessarily, but it really depends on how they're implemented. My biggest problem here is how damn expensive they are. The most expensive game pass in the game is the Overseer Game Pass, which costs 2,500 Robux. I have never seen an Overseer in my entire life, because this is so expensive. As I mentioned earlier, the one that allows you to become Chaos instantly is 1,000 Robux. These are simply just not affordable for the average player. I'm not saying every game needs to have cheap game passes, I'm just saying they need to be reasonable. But how's the atmosphere? I'm also gonna give it a 5. The game looks really outdated by modern Roblox standards. A lot of the areas aren't well lit, especially the heavy containment zone, which is super dark in certain areas. Which is really a shame because that's one of the more interesting looking areas of the facility. All of the anomalies look very Robloxy and not in a good way. Like, just look at what's supposed to be SCP-173.
Look at the top of his head.
Lastly, I just want to say that I'm not trying to crap on anyone's game here. Game development is not easy, even when it comes to Roblox games. I seek to give constructive criticism based on the merits of the game in question. Okay, maybe that was a little too far. I like Mr. Fish though, he gets a pass. I think the reason that this one works and this one doesn't is because Mr. Fish is inherently goofy. So seeing him in the Roblox style actually feels rather fitting, but trying to make a spooky monster in that style is a lot more difficult. And we'll see how games in the future try to tackle this dilemma. Lastly, for the atmosphere section is the music and sound design, and they do what they need to, but nothing stands out to me. Actually, I want to elaborate a little bit more on exactly why I've given this a 5. Because I genuinely do think there are some pretty cool things here atmosphere-wise, but there are also some not so cool things. Like, just look at how nice and well-designed this main menu looks. And then, when you get into the game, look at how much information you're bombarded with at once. I don't think this game looks or sounds bad necessarily, but it could do with quite a bit of refinement. Anyway, we should move on to the SCP score, and when the only place that it actually says SCP is in the name of the game, it doesn't really sit right with me. And it also leads to some kind of goofy things, like 106 being called Old Man. No, not the old man, just old man. Like, if you go to his chamber, it's just a giant sign that says old man. It's ridiculous. What are they? They contain Gramps in there?
Back in my day, we used to...
But other than a few naming problems, I feel like this game represents the SCP universe fairly well. There are a wide number of anomalies, from small objects to entities to even bigger ones, and I think they're all implemented fairly well. The implementation of the Chaos Insurgency is fairly standard when it comes to SCP games, but that's not a bad thing. I do wish there was more on the side of actual testing and experimentation with the anomalies. Most of the game is just spent fighting. I'll give it a 7 for the SCP score. Personal gripes aside, it does implement the SCP universe fairly well. Overall, that's a 17 out of 30. C tier. It could get a lot better, but it could also be a lot worse. So, let's hope it doesn't get worse. Now, this one is a bit unorthodox when it comes to SCP games, but it's one that I was really excited to play. In fact, this wasn't even recommended to me, I just saw it and wanted to play it. You see, I love tower defense games. I could easily spend the rest of my life playing them and never get bored. But in addition to being excited, I was also really curious in how they would pull this off. So, let's take a look. SCP Tower Defense is exactly what it sounds like, and it doesn't deviate too far from the typical Roblox tower defense game formula. In the lobby, there are some platforms that you can step onto, which will teleport you to the actual game. The map for each platform changes every now and then if no one is currently standing on it. If you step onto the platform, a countdown will begin and people can join you up until you're about to start the game. Once you spawn in, you'll be prompted to select a difficulty, of which there are 4. Breach, Calamity, XK Class, and ZK Class. There are several things I really like about this system. For one, the easier difficulties have fewer waves, so those go by faster. Secondly, the easiest difficulty is possible to beat with the default towers. Now, that might seem like a small thing, but a lot of Roblox tower defense games don't even have that, forcing new players to play on difficulties they can't even beat yet. The Breach mode is the perfect difficulty for learning the ropes of how the towers and upgrades work, which, speaking of that, you start off with 2 different towers, the D-Class and the Nine-Tailed Fox. As you might expect, the D-Class is a more cheap but basic tower, while the Nine-Tailed Fox is more expensive but it packs a real punch, especially when it comes to his upgrades. However, the Nine-Tailed Fox can only be placed on special elevated spots, but most maps have plenty of those. I know I already mentioned it, but I really appreciate how new players are given a powerful tower in addition to the typical guy with a pistol starting tower. In addition to your towers, you also have a special ability, called a gadget in-game. The default one is called Missile Barrage, and it's nothing to scoff at. It saved my skin more than a few times when I didn't have a good enough defense setup. For example, when I didn't have mimetic detection yet, since it can hit any enemy type. But it's also just really useful throughout the whole game because the damage that it deals scales with the wave. Like, the devs easily could have given you some useless ability, or even none at all to start with, but instead they give new players an actual useful ability, and I love that. The enemies, as you would expect, are all different SCPs, and different difficulties have different sets of enemies. I was really surprised by the wide array of different SCPs that they picked from when it comes to the enemies in this game. Like, they do have some of the more expected ones, but there were also some more obscure picks that I didn't know about. Luckily, each SCP is labeled with both its official designation and its more colloquial name, so if I ever wanted to know more about a certain SCP, it was really easy to research. Different enemies will have different properties. For example, some SCPs have the mimetic property, which makes it so that your towers will need to have mimetic detection in order to target those enemies. It's kind of funny because enemies with this property just show the word meme next to them. Some other properties enemies can have include health regeneration, or rage, which makes enemies go faster the less health they have. There's actually a pretty huge list of these properties, and it makes you feel like you're actually fighting anomalous entities with their own dangerous anomalous properties. It's great. In addition to these special properties, some enemies have resistances to certain damage types. All these factors make it so that you actually have to strategize about how you're going to handle different enemy types, and it makes the gameplay actually pretty engaging. Let's talk about the maps for a bit. There are 4 different map difficulties, and the harder the difficulty, the more rewards you get. Difficulty is mostly related to map length, but can also be related to how many corners there are, how close the turns are to each other, and how much cliff space there is. Each map is based on a location from the SCP lore, and several of them take place inside SCPs, such as 087 the Stairwell, 3008, which you should obviously know about, and 1678, aka Unlondon. Each map is brimming with little details and references. On the 087 map, there's a secret area with a reference to 087B. And also up here, there's some weird eyes. There are also some special event maps which have their own platforms in the lobby and have different level requirements. They each have unique sets of enemies, different from the regular modes, and all relating back to what the map is based on, and each one rewards you with a new tower. That's another thing I want to talk about, how easy it is to get new towers. There are 3 different kinds of currency: coins, shards, and tokens. You'll earn coins and shards at the end of each game, win or lose, although obviously you get a lot more for winning. Tokens are a bit trickier to earn since you can only earn them from the events and the ZK class difficulty. However, all forms of currencies can be earned through badges, which reward you for completing certain challenges. Each currency can buy a certain set of towers. There are also certain towers, different from all those other ones, that can be earned by meeting certain level thresholds. Or they can be bought with Robux. It's honestly really cool how many different ways there are to get towers. Speaking of towers, certain ones can be evolved, becoming more powerful permanently for a hefty cost. It took me a while, but I'm finally have enough coins to evolve my D-class, so let's see what happens and well, time to do even more grinding!
3 days later.
Yay! I'm finally level 30. Let's evolve this D-class! Woo! Each tower, when evolved, becomes more powerful, gaining new abilities, and, in general, is just more awesome. Take, for example, the evolved D-class, which is very similar to the regular D-class throughout its upgrade paths until you get to the final upgrade. Well, actually, that's the thing. There is no final upgrade. That's right, baby. Infinite upgrades! Each upgrade boosts a random stat permanently and costs slightly more than the last. And what you get is an absolute killing machine. Remember Guy with a pistol from earlier? Yeah, this is him now. This is the guy your girlfriend told you not to worry about. Absolutely shredding bosses, taking names, and looking fresh while doing it. That was totally worth the days of grinding. Okay, maybe I should calm down just a little bit. And you know what, I think I've explained this game's mechanics well enough, so let's get to the score, starting with gameplay of course. Maybe my tower defense bias is showing here, but yeah, I really enjoyed playing this game. Using the different towers, playing different difficulties on different maps with different tower loadouts. There's definitely some grinding to be done here and there, but I don't mind grinding if the game is actually fun. And when there are so many different ways to earn new towers, it feels like you're always being rewarded. And like I said, the game itself is fun, which helps a lot. The different special properties enemies can have makes it so that you actually have to think carefully about where you put your towers, how you use your abilities, when you upgrade certain towers, and which ones to upgrade first. Is it a bit derivative of other Roblox tower defense games? Maybe, but they kinda all are. A video I had in the works about a year ago was a Roblox tower defense game tier list. I eventually scrapped it because playing basically the same game with a new coat of paint over and over again was getting really tedious, especially with how much grinding there was to do in each game. So, as someone who has played a lot of Roblox tower defense games, I can tell you that SCP tower defense is genuinely different. It's been fun the whole way through with how many different towers there are, the evolutions, the maps, and as I mentioned earlier, so many nice quality of life features. When it comes to Roblox tower defense games, this is exactly what I want to see. So, 10 out of 10. Onto Atmosphere. As I mentioned, the maps are really detailed and nice looking. Each one has a unique atmosphere to it. The towers are well designed and well modeled, including all the upgrades and even the skins. That's right, there are even tower skins. I don't usually buy skins in games, but I really like that it's an option for people who want those. The enemies look great too, although some of them look kind of familiar. Still, I'd rather have assets reused from something else than, well... The UI looks really nice, and everything feels very responsive. The music and sound design are pretty good. The main theme kinda gets tiring after hearing it 1,000 times, but you can of course just turn off the music in the settings. I don't think I can give it a perfect score due to a few reasons. 1, the reused assets, 2, the presence of some strange visual glitches sometimes, and 3, just a few things that I think could be improved here and there in terms of atmosphere. But on the whole, this game looks and sounds great, so I'm still giving it a 9. Finally, the SCP score. Now, this is where that thing that I mentioned earlier about making smart gameplay decisions while still being influenced by the lore becomes important. I'm not about to go, you can kill 682 in this game, which shouldn't be possible according to the lore. Like, obviously, dude, it's a game. So, I'm giving it a 10. Now, hold on, hear me out. This game has so many different SCPs in it, and so many different parts of the lore too. And the fact that each SCP has its official designation along with a more common name is great. It makes it super easy to look up an SCP if you're interested in learning more about it. For example, I hadn't heard of SCP-610 before this, and it's one of the basic enemies in the game, so I wanted to learn more about it. Can you believe that? Actually encouraging people to go out and learn more about SCPs? I mean, this is a tower defense game. It's not that hard. They even have a tower that's a reference to SCP-666-J, which is like my favorite joke article. Basically, this guy named Dr. Gerald found that he was so bad at driving that whenever he drove a vehicle of any kind, he would cause absolute mayhem. In-game, he spawns vehicles which do damage when they ram into enemies, which is an absolutely brilliant way to incorporate him in the game. And there's so many different examples of that kind of thing throughout this game. So many different parts of the SCP universe are represented in this game, and it's clear that the developers really care about getting it right. I honestly can't think of a better way that they could have converted the SCP universe into a tower defense game. So that's why I'm giving it a 10 for the SCP score. And that's an overall score of 29. S tier. This game is the most fun I've had so far. I highly recommend it, especially if you love tower defense games like I do. This is the second game in a row that's just SCP and then the name of a game genre. That's not really related to anything, I just thought that was interesting. Anyway, SCP Roleplay is exactly as it sounds. It's a roleplay game where you're at an SCP site, and as usual, you can be one of several factions. Foundation, Class D, Chaos Insurgency, but not SCP, as all hostile SCPs in this game are NPCs, with the exception of players getting infected by SCPs such as 008 or 409. But even then, it's not really an SCP as much as it is a person getting infected by one. The SCP NPCs in this game are actually unkillable, and will require special containment measures if the Foundation hopes to recontain them. I really like that. It makes it feel a lot more realistic. In fact, this game in general takes a much more realistic approach to how an SCP facility would actually work. The layout of the facility makes a lot more sense than most. Instead of being a giant maze that's a nightmare to navigate like most SCP games that take place inside a site, this one is structured much more closely to what an actual SCP facility would be like. The map itself is divided into 3 different sectors. Sector 1 is this game's equivalent of the entrance zone. It's full of different administrative rooms, as well as an auditorium, a cafeteria, a shooting range, and of course, the entrance itself. This is where D-Class will hope to run off to if they want to escape. Speaking of Class D, let's move on to Sector 2. This is the core of the facility, and where the CDC is. No, not that CDC, the Class D cells. The only way out for Class D is through these doors on the ground floor, which are almost always guarded by armed personnel, who are allowed to shoot you if you go over the line or if you pull out a weapon. It's not always easy to escape as Class D, but I like that. It shouldn't be easy for a D-Class to escape an SCP site. It's not impossible though, but we'll discuss that a bit more later. Other areas in Sector 2 include the control room, which allows personnel to view the containment status of major SCPs, and security feed of various rooms in the facility. This is also where the Chaos Insurgency will go to sabotage various systems. And then there's the Transformers room, the medical sector, and a few safe and Euclid level SCPs are here as well. Let's move on to the final sector, Sector 3, which is essentially equivalent to the Heavy Containment Zone, featuring the MTF spawn and several Euclid and Keter class SCPs. Each SCP containment chamber has an appropriate amount of precautionary measures for what it's containing. If it's a deadly threat that could potentially pose harm to humanity, it's going to have several safety nets, and it's not necessarily going to be easy for it to breach. There's one more major location in this game, but it's not one you'll find on a map. It's the Chaos Insurgency Caves, which of course is where the CI spawn is. The Chaos Insurgency spawn is also a way for Class D to escape in addition to the facility entrance. From the CI spawn, there's many ways to get into the facility, either needing to bust doors down by clicking on them, or using C4 to get in. Okay, now that we've talked about the map, let's talk about the roles. Starting of course with Class D, which is usually my favorite role to be in these kinds of SCP games. I just like the thrill of escaping the Foundation. Now, as I said earlier, the grounded exit of the CDC is usually guarded by, well, guards. Now, sometimes the Foundation is busy with something else and you can just walk out. But when that's not an option, you have a few more options. In the very back of the CDC is this soccer room, but what's important is this little cave here with a Chaos Insurgency NPC that can sell you weapons, armor, and other special things for in-game credits. The weapons themselves are super cheap, which I kinda like, but also it feels a little too easy to get weapons in my opinion. Now, you can try to use these weapons to shoot the guards to escape, but that will usually not go well for you unless you have some D-boy buddies to support you, since the Foundation is usually pretty well coordinated. Even if you take the first set of guards down, there will be more waiting for you in the facility. What I prefer to do is go along with a scientist, who can give you clearance to come with them, and then making a break for it when they're distracted. Now, this can be difficult sometimes, as they will often be accompanied by members of security to make sure you don't do that very thing. But that's why you bring a gun, of course. Now, you don't actually necessarily need to escape as a D-class, as this game actually has some pretty cool testing features, and scientists will come by pretty often for rounds of testing, so if you want to be a guinea pig, this game actually has the proper mechanics for that. Now, it should be noted that you won't actually become a Chaos Insurgent if you escape as a Class D. Instead, you'll have to select Chaos Insurgency in the menu if you want to spawn as one. However, there is a limit to how many Chaos there can be at one time, which changes with the number of players in the server. As CI, your job is to disrupt the Foundation as much as possible. As always. This involves breaking into the facility, shooting any Foundation personnel you see, helping Class D escape, breaching SCPs, and sabotaging the Foundation's systems. For example, you can turn off the power by planting C4 on one of the Transformers. Each sabotage will take some time and make some noise. So it's best to coordinate with your fellow Chaos agents, which you can do with the radio, which will allow you to send a message to all Chaos members. In my experience, each team actually tends to be pretty well coordinated in this game, which makes things very nice. Typically, in the conflict of the Foundation versus Chaos, it will be down to which team coordinates better. Knowing where your teammates are, what they're doing, and backing them up when necessary is key to success in this game. This applies to the other side of the coin too, with the Foundation, which have a separate radio channel that all levels of Foundation members have access to, from scientists to MTF. As a member of the Security Department, or MTF, your role is to make sure that D-Class stay in line, escorting scientists around the facility, and stopping the Chaos Insurgency from, well, causing chaos. This can be aided by knowledge of where the Chaos entry points are, knowing what they might be doing at any given time, and of course, good communication and coordination. It's actually a really fun game of cat and mouse on both sides. The Chaos have just enough ways of getting in, sneaking around, and disrupting things that they have a chance to be successful. But the Foundation has a numbers advantage, so if they coordinate properly and they're always on high alert, they can stop the Chaos Insurgency from seeing their goals through. Let's talk about non-security roles for the Foundation. You can be a scientist and do tests on the various SCPs using D-Class as test subjects. You even have a whole test log and cool testing features like the messaging system, which allows a scientist to communicate with a D-Class even if they're separated by a wall. It's actually really cool. It makes you feel like you're actually testing these anomalous objects. Of course, sometimes the Chaos are busy taking over the facility, and it's not going to be the best time to be testing. Luckily, the Foundation has a shop just like the Class D do, so you can practice your Second Amendment rights and be a nerd with a gun. Next, there's the medical team, which can heal Foundation members, do various tests on their injuries, and make vaccines for SCP-008 and SCP-409, with this strange agar minigame. Lastly is the administrative department, which I don't really have any experience with, so I don't have much to say about them. Last thing I should mention before I get to the score is the special events you can buy from the shop, including a nuke event and an SCP-001 When Day Breaks event. For the nuke event, you have a limited amount of time to get to a bunker or outside, otherwise you'll be blown up. Now, this is a typical trope in SCP site games, but I really like the way that this is implemented here. The music makes it properly dramatic, and you'll continue that faction war, except now each faction is fighting for control over the bunker or the outside. After the nuke goes off, you'll respawn in a rusted facility devoid of power, and I just really like the atmosphere in this part. As for the 001 event, any player that dies while the event is active will get infected by the evil sun and become a flesh blob, and everyone else will have to hide or defend themselves from these flesh blobs, or else get turned into one. This event can be pretty fun sometimes, but also, if you hide in the right places, you'll basically just never get found. Okay, now on to the score. For gameplay, I'll give it an 8. I had a ton of fun in this game. The combat was fun and engaging. Like I said, that cat and mouse game between MTF and Chaos is really enjoyable. But to get to that point, you have to first deal with the far less engaging game of Guards versus Class D, since you can't play as MTF or Chaos until you have enough global XP. The Class D gameplay is definitely a bit lacking in this game. Don't get me wrong, I like being a guinea pig, but when it comes to the aspect of escaping, there's really not much motivation there to do it, since you'll just respawn in your cell after you escape. Also, being able to acquire weapons so easily feels a little cheap. Like, I feel like there should be a little bit more of a barrier or challenge for Class D to obtain weapons, since they're so powerful. Speaking of weapons, they're generally satisfying to use, but sometimes there's some weird issues with them which can cause problems in dire situations. On the whole though, this game was fun. Coordinating with your team feels super nice, and the player base is super good about that sort of thing. When you're playing Chaos and you successfully sneak into the facility with some Chaos buddies, planting bombs and wrecking havoc, it's so much fun. And vice versa is true as well. When you stop a team of Chaos as MTF, it's really fun. But I feel like there's just a few aspects of the gameplay that could be improved. So, 8. On to Atmosphere. I really like the atmosphere in this game. It feels like a really realistic SCP facility, like a place you'd actually work at. Not to mention the lighting, which is fantastic. No matter where you are or what's happening, the lighting looks great in this game, and is just really well designed. I love the vibe of the Chaos Caves especially. Let's talk about the designs for the SCPs themselves. I really like them. The 173 design is unique in a really good way. Not exactly a horrifying design, but it looks good stylistically. This is a small detail, but I love these little posters outside each SCP chamber. They're fun and well designed, and just a neat touch in general. Each area feels like it has a good amount of detail to it as well. I like how each role looks, although sometimes it can be hard to tell an MTF apart from a Chaos from a distance. Although, maybe that's the point. I don't know, it's annoying either way. The combat feels super good. The hit markers and kill messages add a nice dopamine hit for each kill. I like how you have the choice to fight in either first or third person, and it's well optimized for both. Now on to the music and sound design section. Yeah, it's really good. 10 out of 10 for Atmosphere. And while we're at it, let's just... yeah. I think I've talked enough already about how realistic this game is when it comes to the SCP lore. This is one of the best SCP games for hardcore SCP fans. That's a 28 out of 30 total, and another S tier. 2 in a row. Let's hope we can keep the streak going. Didn't we just do this one? No, that was the other one. Oh, this is SCP Site Roleplay. The last one was just called SCP Roleplay. Yeah, there's no getting around it. This is an extremely similar game to the other two Site Roleplay games we've covered so far. The only reason I'm covering all 3 of these is because they were all suggested to me, and I don't want anyone to feel like their suggestions are being ignored. And I promise, this is the last game of this type that I'll be covering. But because this game is so similar, I'm going to spend a lot less time explaining the roles and how everything works. Instead, let's focus on what's different about this game. If you'll recall, in Site-76, the Class D experience was mostly focused on escaping. In SCP Roleplay, it felt like there was an equal incentive to escape or participate in tests. In SCP Site Roleplay, Class D gameplay is heavily favored towards testing. In fact, there's actually not even an exit for Class D to escape out of. Now, technically, you can sort of escape with this vent system, which will allow you to get to a Chaos base. Here, you can grab some weapons and plan an attack on the Foundation, with fellow Rogue Class D and Chaos Insurgent members. There is a way to get a badge for escaping, but it only involves getting to the entrance of the facility, which doesn't actually go to the outside world, but instead to this tram system which can be used to navigate the facility, so it doesn't really feel like you're escaping. Now, let's go back to the Chaos Insurgency for a bit. In Site-76, you had to either escape as Class D or get a Game Pass to play as Chaos. In SCP Roleplay, you could either wait until you have enough global EXP to play as Chaos, or buy a Game Pass. But in SCP Site Roleplay, you can only play as Chaos if you have a Game Pass. I think this should go without saying, but that's not great. Again, to reiterate my stance on Game Passes, I think Game Passes are fine as long as they're reasonably priced for what they're offering. In this case, I don't really think any price is reasonable since it locks people out of one of the major factions if they don't buy it.
Now, this generally means you'll see fewer chaos in this game when compared to the other games, but you'll still see them from time to time. But overall, the gameplay in this game is just much more focused on testing, which to the game's credit is quite the comprehensive process. It starts here, in the CDC, where the D class will line up, waiting for some scientists to come around for testing. Then, the Class D will be transferred into this holding cell of sorts, where they'll be briefed on what they're going to be tested on, what's expected of them, how many people they'll need, that sort of thing. Then, when everything's in order, they'll walk over to the chamber and perform a test on the SCP. This experience will vary heavily depending on what SCP is being tested, but usually ends with the Class D dying.
Oh, there you are.
Generally though, the more dangerous the SCP is, the further into the facility you'll have to go. There are 3 different containment areas: Containment 1, Containment 2, and Containment X, each hosting more deadly threats than the last. This game has a lot of SCPs to test on, like, a lot, and multiple ways for certain tests to go. So the testing in this game actually gets pretty serious, and people treat it as a serious thing in this game. Now, that's not to say that this game doesn't have its goofy moments. It certainly does, and to its benefits. Most of the time. Now, this is definitely the most roleplay-focused roleplay game, so if you enjoy roleplay, then this might be the pick for you. Now, again, it does have actual game mechanics to it, like combat mechanics, leveling systems, hostile NPCs, and of course, a nuke sequence. You can't have an SCP site game without a nuke sequence. And, I think that's it. You can also throw food at the guards as D-Class. That's pretty funny. I mean, like I said earlier, there are mechanics that I'm not covering here because I've already covered how they work in similar games. Like, of course, there's other roles like guards and scientists and medical personnel, but you guys already know how those work at this point. So let's just move on to the score. Gameplay, I'll give a 7. Coming straight from SCP Roleplay, the combat is a noticeable downgrade here. No hit markers, the gun handling is noticeably worse. Maybe it's not really fair to directly compare two games' mechanics to one another, but since I played them back to back, this is just how I experienced it. However, as I said before, the biggest strength of this game is the role-playing aspect of it. Playing as a D-Class is one of my favorite things because I get to constantly go face-to-face with all the various SCPs, and a lot of interesting things can happen along the way as well. The sheer number of SCPs to be tested on ensures that you'll pretty much never get bored when it comes to testing. Still though, the fact that certain roles are completely locked behind a game pass doesn't sit right with me, so it loses a couple points due to that. For atmosphere, I'll give it a 9. The game looks great, although it can be pretty laggy sometimes, even on my computer, which can play AAA games while maintaining a smooth and steady FPS. But like I said, the game does look great, and the site has a unique look to it when compared to other SCP games. In particular, I really like the design of the CDC. It has a very sleek design considering it's basically a prison. When it comes to the character design / SCP design, I think it's really well done. And when it comes to music and sound design, it's pretty good. And for the SCP score, it's getting a 10. To be honest, this is probably the easiest category to get a 10 in, so it really amazes me that so many games fail to do so. But yeah, a ton of different SCPs are represented here, and all the ones I got a chance to interact with were really well done. That's a 26 out of 30, just barely missing S tier. While I personally prefer SCP Roleplay for its superior combat mechanics, I can see why some would prefer this game instead. It does have its own appeals in the realm of SCP site games. That being said, I'm getting kinda tired of these SCP site games, so let's try something else. Finally some fresh air. Welcome to the Red Lake, a game based on SCP-354. It has a few different game modes, but we're going to be focusing mainly on the classic game mode, since that's what people always choose, and it's the one I have the most experience with. But first, let's go over SCP-354 for those of you who might not know about it. Essentially, SCP-354 is a lake of blood-like substance in northern Canada that entities sometimes come out of. The lake itself seems to react to the Foundation's efforts to contain it, and can adapt to different containment situations, becoming more and more dangerous as the Foundation tries to keep it under control, and even more dangerous if the Foundation tries to explore it. In this game, you play as a member of the SCP Foundation, working alongside other human players to keep the Red Lake at bay. You need to prevent the lake monsters from getting to the generator on the opposite side of the map. Or, at least, that's the short-term goal. The long-term goal is to conduct research and then pump the lake with to stop the lake from producing more monsters. There's just one problem. Well, besides the fact that there are monsters constantly flowing from the lake. The monsters are getting stronger. This is known as corruption. Corruption has 10 levels, each additional level making the monsters even deadlier. There are a few ways to fight corruption, but the main way is with subs. You'll have to drag them to the lake and then go down and target the corruption cores. If you let the corruption get too high, the chance of your team being overwhelmed becomes almost guaranteed, especially if you don't have good enough players. But don't worry, you'll have plenty of help along the way. Early on, you'll get to choose a team to help you out in the fight, and it's the GOC. Everyone always chooses the GOC. They give all guns a straight-up damage increase, no strings attached, so it's the obvious choice. Secondly, your research team will sometimes offer to do some research on the lake. This can have positive effects or negative ones, so it's essentially a gamble, though the odds are slightly in your favor. Luckily, if you don't feel like gambling, you can choose to say, "Screw you nerds, let's just keep shooting these monsters and see what happens." Unluckily for you though, everyone in the server gets a vote, and sometimes you can't stop them. But what I would generally advise is to communicate with your team and listen to them and just talk about what the best option is. Most reasonable teams will go along with what's best. And good coordination is an incredibly important thing in this game. So let's talk about the actual gameplay itself. You know, the shooty part. There are different operators you can play as, each with their own perks and sometimes abilities. Since I'm still pretty new to the game, I don't have a ton to choose from. You unlock them mainly through leveling, but you can also earn certain ones by completing certain challenges, and some are locked behind game passes, but I'm fine with that in this case because there are so many free ones to choose from. You also have operator levels, independent from your global level. As you play and get kills with specific operators, their perks will get better and you'll eventually reach a mastery level, which will grant you even more perks. One of the ones you can get pretty early on is called Viper, a former Serpent Hand member which can cast spells.
Shadow Wizard Buddy Gang, we love casting spells.
Another early operator I enjoy using is RCU, which is good with shotguns. I really like using shotguns. You have a certain amount of money you can spend in-game, and you get more as the round progresses and you reach certain goals. You can spend this money on new weapons, faction upgrades, buildings, and more. But let's go back to the matter at hand. The lake, or more specifically, the monsters. Walkers, exploders, riots, rapids, ghosts, necros, and everything else when it comes to basic enemies. My point is, there's a lot of them, and they all have different mechanics, so you really gotta know what you're dealing with if you want to win. And then there are the big boys, the guys who get health bars at the top part of the HUD. Brute, Bolty, Titan, and especially the dreaded Kraken. These guys will need proper coordination to take down, especially if you're playing on the harder difficulties. Speaking of difficulties, there's easy, medium, brutal, and Death Wish, which is an extension of brutal. It's funny because more people actually have the badge for the completing medium than easy, because like, why would anyone play easy mode? Also, there's two different endings for brutal mode, a good ending and a bad ending. But what about the other game modes? Well, I've actually not even played any of the other game modes, except for Raid. Frankly, no one ever really picks the other game modes, but just for your information, I'll still go over them. The Raid game mode involves infiltrating a Chaos Insurgency base to steal materials from the insurgency. This one is very different from the main game mode and is more of a linear adventure than a wave-based thing. There's just one problem with this whole operation. Your commander is an NPC, and he just kinda stands there in the middle of battle, and if he dies, you lose. So, the Shadow War game mode is extremely similar, except you're stealing documents from the GRUP, and now you have 2 people you need to defend. Great. Lastly, there's Extraction, which involves defending a Palatial dockyard from a Chaos Insurgency attack. This one is much more close to the original game mode, featuring several waves of enemies until you get to a boss. Like I said though, I really don't have any experience with these other game modes, so let's move on to the score. Gameplay is easily a 10. This is a super fast-paced, super fun game. The combat mechanics feel great. It's fun to shoot monsters. Cooperating with your teammates feels super rewarding, and there's tons of incentives to play as well, with the different operatives, operative levels, a crafting system, quests. You get tons of rewards for winning as well, especially on the harder difficulties. This game was a real breath of fresh air in this journey. I think this is the new most fun I've had so far. Sorry, SCP Tower Defense, you're still great. But this game was really, really fun. For atmosphere, I'm kinda conflicted. The main map for the classic game mode doesn't really look that good. It relies heavily on the classic Roblox terrain, which doesn't really look that good these days, and it just doesn't have a ton of detail in general. That being said, I think this game would be very laggy if it had more detail. It's already laggy enough with all the monsters and everything happening. But the other maps in this game mode are actually pretty good looking. The problem is, you're going to spend most of your time on this map, because it's what people pick the most. So... But there is one thing in this category which brings this score up a lot. The music. There's no denying that this game's soundtrack bangs. And there are other aspects of the visuals that look good, such as the design of the operators, and the interior of the base looks pretty cool as well. The enemies have a very basic design, but they're pretty distinct, so it's easy to tell them apart. You know what, I think I'll give this game a 7 for atmosphere. I don't think I can give it anything lower considering how hard the soundtrack goes. For the SCP score, I'm also a bit conflicted. This game doesn't really feature any of the entities from the SCP-354 article, but because of the nature of SCP-354, it doesn't necessarily need to, since the lake itself is known to dynamically respond to the Foundation's efforts. It could really spit out anything as far as we know. Still, I think I'd like to see a bit more representation of the actual SCP article itself. But, on the whole, it does a good job representing the SCP universe, especially with all the different factions implemented. So, 8 out of 10 for the SCP score. That's an overall score of 25. Another A tier.
Hey, they've got some work for you. Do me a favor and step out of your cell. What are you, stupid or something? I said step out of the cell. You have got to be the dumbest test subject we've ever had. Oh well, shut the doors and open the gas valve.
So yeah, this game is extremely similar to SCP Containment Breach, specifically SCP Containment Breach Multiplayer. Now, I'm not going to explain in detail the gameplay of SCP Containment Breach because if you've made it this far into a video about SCP games and you have no idea what SCP Containment Breach is like, that's on you, my guy. Thanks for watching though, I really appreciate it. But yeah, it has all the SCPs. Well, actually, some are missing, but we'll get to that later. All the rooms, all the achievements, everything. It also has some content from the Ultimate Edition mod as well. In Anomaly Breach 2, there are several different roles you can play as. Of course, you have your Class D, Janitor, Scientist, which all have the same starting point and end goal, to escape. The difference being what you start with. A Class D doesn't start with anything useful. A Janitor starts with a radio and a level 0 keycard. And Scientists start with a clipboard, a radio, and a level 2 key card. Besides what they spawn with, the biggest difference is of course who their allies and enemies are. As usual, Class D are friendly with the Chaos and hostile with guards and MTF. Although a good chunk of Foundation personnel will just straight up ignore you as a Class D. This can be due to a few reasons. One is that if you're playing on Keter mode, you can only damage or be damaged by people playing on Keter mode. Then the same is true for either Safe or Euclid mode, which are put in the same category for this rule. Oh, and FYI, Keter mode works the same way as it does in Containment Breach, where you can't save. However, Euclid mode works slightly differently in that you can save wherever you want, as opposed to in Containment Breach where you need special monitors to save. And in Safe mode, you can save wherever you want and use console commands if you want, although you'll need a Game Pass to access console commands. Another reason guards don't usually attack Class D is there's just not much to be gained from it. There's no XP or money systems, there's just no rewards to be gained. They'll usually only shoot Class D that are armed, and that's right, any role can use weapons, you just gotta know where to find them. As Janitor or Scientist, you'll of course want to stick with guards and MTF, and stay away from Chaos members and armed D-Class, since those are much less likely to hesitate to shoot you, at least in my experience. And then there's the Doctor role, which spawns in with a medkit, a radio, and a level 2 keycard. Basically a straight upgrade from the Scientist. Your goal as a Doctor is also to escape, but you can choose to try and help out your fellow Foundation members if you're feeling generous. Likewise with the Guard role, which is the last free role in the game. As a Guard, you can either help the Foundation people escape, or help yourself escape. You spawn in with a gas mask, a helmet, a bulletproof vest, a navigator, a radio, a level 2 keycard, and of course, guns. Specifically a P90 and a USP. As I just said, that's it for the free roles, which of course means that MTF and Chaos are locked behind Game Passes, SCP Pack 1 and SCP Pack 2 respectively, which will also allow players to play as different SCPs in the future, such as 049 or 035, although these features are not currently implemented. Strangely though, 049 exists as an NPC in this game, but 035 doesn't, so I'm not exactly sure how that's going to work when the update comes out. But anyway, going back to my stance on Game Passes, I really don't think it's fair to lock players out of a major role in the game by— wait, it's only 25 Robux? In this case, I don't really think any price is reasonable since it locks people out of one of the major factions if they don't buy it. Okay, I take back what I said. 25 Robux is actually a completely fair price in this case. I think I was so used to Game Passes being at least triple-digit numbers of Robux, if not more, that I couldn't imagine prices this fair when I said that. I know, I'm a bit of a hypocrite, but hey, you can't lie, those prices are great. So let's go over these rules. When it comes to MTF, you actually have two different choices. As of right now anyway, more will hopefully be added later. Nine-tailed fox or see no evil. Besides having different appearances, the only functional differences between the two are the gear you spawn with. Both spawn with an upgraded navigator, a level 5 keycard, scramble gear for 096, a crowbar, and a USP, but they both have different primary weapons. You have some special abilities as MTF, such as these callouts.
Class D found. Class D spotted. What for? Blinking.
Which can be pretty useful.
Stop right. Target is down.
Or pretty silly.
You stop!
Oh, hey. Class D.
Control to nine-tailed fox. Potential threats. See any unauthorized intruders or escapees ping on your navigation devices. This place is...
If you're by a Tesla gate, you can get control to disable it by using this callout.
Nine-tailed fox to control. Requesting the disabling of the Tesla gate nearest to our position. Control to nine-tailed fox. Tesla gate disabled.
You also have special tools to contain SCPs, such as the aforementioned scramble gear or using the cage to contain 173. As Chaos, you spawn at Gate B, and your job is, as always, to disrupt the Foundation as much as you can, shooting Foundation personnel, escorting D-Class, freeing SCPs. However, it is likely that most of your time will be spent fighting, since you're always outnumbered by Foundation personnel. But if you bring a Chaos buddy along or two, and you coordinate properly, you can cause some real chaos. I guess let's get to the review section. It's kind of weird trying to give this game a score since it so closely follows the recipe of Containment Breach, which is one of my favorite games ever, yes, but should I give this game points for just copying all those mechanics? Well, to be fair, sometimes this game does play quite differently from Containment Breach. Since several SCPs can be contained, it doesn't always feel like a Containment Breach. I guess that's why they call it an Anomaly Breach. Sometimes you'll spawn in, and basically any of the normal hostile threats you'd have to worry about are already contained. And because each SCP's attention is divided between every player in the facility, it doesn't really feel like you're encountering SCPs as much as you would be in Containment Breach. And even with all the hostile enemy players running around you might encounter, it's still just not very difficult to escape. Now, I'm not trying to say that this is the easiest game in the world or anything. It certainly can be tricky sometimes, especially if you're playing on Keter mode, where obviously you can't save. But on the whole, this is a lot easier of an experience than Containment Breach is. And like I said earlier, there's no XP system or money or anything like that. The closest thing to a reward in this game is that you can earn new roles for escaping on certain difficulty as certain classes, but you'll run out of new ones to unlock pretty quickly, as there aren't that many roles to be unlocked. Now, I'm not saying every game needs number go up mechanics to be fun, but if you're not going to have anything like that, you're relying purely on how fun your game is to keep people coming back, which is pretty bold. So, is there any reason to play this when you could just install SCP Containment Breach, or better yet, SCP Containment Breach Multiplayer Edition, for free? Well, I suppose this gets into a deeper question. Maybe one I could make a video about. Is any Roblox game that's a recreation of a game that already exists going to ever be more worth playing than the original? Especially if the original game is free? Well, I'd say probably not in most cases, but there is one thing that the Roblox version of a game can always offer. Unique experiences. This segment has been filled with more funny gameplay clips than any other, just because throwing a bunch of Roblox players into SCP Containment Breach is a recipe for some very interesting experiences. The culture of Roblox is just something that can't be recreated anywhere else, so playing a Roblox game is just gonna give you a different experience. As an example, let me tell you a story about the first time I played this game. So, if you want to get a unique experience, maybe this game is worth playing. You know what? After all that yapping, I have honestly no idea what to rate this. I guess I'll give it a 6. It feels fitting. Although, this game is still in active development, so hopefully more exciting things are added in the future, particularly things that will set it apart from other versions of Containment Breach. For atmosphere, it's getting a 9. Its goal is to look like SCP Containment Breach, and you know what? It does that perfectly. Almost too perfectly. Honestly, the only giveaways that this is Roblox is the blocky avatars. And the atmosphere of SCP Containment Breach is obviously fantastic, so this game retains all of that. One thing that I think is unique to this game is the weather effects on the surface, which are very atmospheric. I really like them. So, if everything's so perfect, why am I giving it a 9? Well, just look at 106. Yeah. And for the SCP score, I guess I have to give it a 10. I mean, it's as accurate as Containment Breach is, which is really accurate to the SCP lore. It feels a little weird to give it all the credit for copying something else, but this is a game review, not college, so... Maybe you expected me to go on a rant about the term anomaly again, but it's only used in the title, so that's fine. That's an overall score of 25, A tier, which is funny because that's the same overall score as the Red Lake, but for almost the opposite reason. The Red Lake had really good gameplay, but not as good atmosphere, while this had alright gameplay, but excellent atmosphere. I guess copying the most popular SCP game is a good formula for success. But what about copying the second most popular SCP game?
That's right, this next game is based on the classic Silent Maze for iOS. Or is it silent? If you're a fan of SCP games and you haven't played this, you're not a fan of SCP games. Now that's a real masterpiece right there. But, okay, fine, maybe Silent Maze isn't the second most popular SCP game. No, instead that title goes to a game I referenced earlier, SCP Secret Lab. However, unlike Anomaly Breach 2, this game has unique features, roles, areas, and SCPs. In fact, it's almost not even fair to directly compare these two games, as Anomaly Breach 2 is pretty much a direct remake of Containment Breach, while Project SCP is just a game based on Secret Lab. And as far as I can tell, all the assets used are original. Project SCP is an asymmetrical round-based game. There are functionally 4 factions in this game, only 3 of which spawn right away. The Foundation, the Class D/Chaos Insurgency, the GOC, and the SCPs. When a new round starts, each player will be assigned to a random team, and you'll have to carry out that role's objective. If you're a scientist, janitor, or Class D, your job is just to escape. Once you escape, you'll become the combat version of your team. Foundation members will become MTF, and Class D will become Chaos. That is, unless you're cuffed, which will turn you into the opposite team's combat role. If you're a guard, your job is to make sure the scientists and janitors get out safely, cuffing cooperative Class Ds and terminating uncooperative ones. And of course, as SCP, your job is to kill as many people as possible. The GOC is the only team that doesn't spawn right away, only being spawned in spawn waves. Speaking of spawn waves, as the round progresses and the number of dead players increases, spawn waves will begin occurring. It should be noted that it doesn't matter what team you were when you died. When a spawn wave occurs, every spawning player will be a part of the same team. This can cause some funny interactions sometimes. Like, for example, if you get shot by a scientist as a Class D at the start of the round, depending on which team gets a spawn wave next, you're either going to be allies, enemies, or neutral with the guy who just shot you. Now, Secret Lab players might be curious as to how the GOC works, since that's one of the unique things about Project SCP. Well, essentially, they have the exact same enemies as the Foundation, but are neutral with the Foundation. What this means is they can cooperate with the Foundation to take down the SCP and the Chaos Insurgency, or they can just shoot each other. And you can probably imagine which way that usually goes. So let's talk about the win conditions for each role. And prepare yourself, because this is kind of a doozy. Basically, both the Chaos Insurgency and the Foundation will get points for their escapees successfully escaping, including cuffed members of the opposing faction. For one of these teams to win, they need to survive while all their enemies are dead, and they need at least one successful escapee of their faction. If they weren't able to get enough escapees for their faction, but all their enemies are dead, including GOC, then it's a stalemate. If neither side got enough escapees, but there's a GOC alive and all GOC enemies are dead, it's a GOC win. If the SCPs successfully prevent any escapees from getting out, and all the SCP's enemies are dead, then it's an SCP win. This actually means that a lot of the time the fate of the game is decided before it's even over, because by the time that all escapees have either escaped or died, the win conditions are already decided. But it's important to realize that a lot of players aren't just playing to satisfy their win condition. Like, yes, you want to kill your enemies, but if you don't get enough escapees to win, and you're still playing, you're not just gonna give up. So, win conditions are important, but they're not the thing that drives the gameplay. What people play for the most is the combat, whether it be between two human factions or between humans and SCPs. While the game features many specific map layouts, the map is generally structured similarly to the typical SCP site layout. It's kind of funny because this game is based on SCP Secret Lab, which is based on SCP Containment Breach, resulting in the game dev version of a game of telephone, where there are still elements of the original SCP Containment Breach site, like the separation of the site into different zones, the checkpoint system, the splitting of the surface into Gate A and Gate B, But it also has its own areas, such as the Surface Containment Zone. Not to be confused with the Surface Zone. The Surface Containment Zone is connected to the Light Containment Zone and is where a lot of the safe SCPs are kept. Much like in Secret Lab, the Light Containment Zone, and by extension the Surface Containment Zone, will be decontaminated after 10 minutes, meaning anyone inside will be trapped in there and slowly killed by gas. This is important to keep in mind, because not only is it where 3 of the 5 starting roles spawn, but it's also where SCP-914 is, and that's of course where your key to getting high-level keycards is. After 20 minutes passes, the nuke sequence will auto-start, although it can be manually activated before that point. These 2 automatic sequences are generally to make sure that rounds go by quickly, and that some person hiding in some random corner of the map can't just stall the game. I suppose then that it would make the most sense to divide rounds into 3 stages: the early game, the mid game, and the late game. The early game is when everyone initially spawns in. The escapee classes try to get keycards and upgrade them to get out of the light containment zone. Facility guards make their way into the facility, trying to damage SCPs and escorting escapees out of the facility. And SCPs either take on the guards or try to kill as many potential escapees as possible. After about 5 minutes, the first spawn wave will occur. The team that spawns in this first spawn wave will be very important to the game's outcome, because this is the spawn wave that will occur when the most escapees are alive. I'd say shortly after this first spawn wave is when the early game ends and the mid game begins. The mid game is the bulk of the round, and it's where a lot of different things can happen, depending on how good each team is, how well coordinated each team is. This is usually where the fate of the game is decided. The spawn waves are obviously also a big part of the mid game and another huge factor to the game's outcome. When there are no remaining escapees and at least 3 spawn waves have occurred, I would consider this to be the late game. This usually involves everyone getting funneled towards the exits and inevitably fighting on the surface. If there's only 1 human team left, they'll focus on trying to kill the SCPs. If it's a war between 2 human factions, they'll fight it out to see who comes on top. Sometimes a losing team might be holding out for the last spawn wave, hoping that their team spawns. It should be noted that only 4 spawn waves occur per round, so after the nuke goes off and the last spawn wave occurs, the game is going to end very quickly, as everyone's on the surface and no one can respawn. So I think that's enough explanation. Let's get to the score. I really enjoy the gameplay loop of this game. I enjoyed it in Secret Lab, which I have quite a few hours in, and I enjoy it here too. But unlike the previous game we talked about, there are many reasons to play Project SCP instead of SCP Secret Lab. Unique playable SCPs, a whole extra team to play as, different areas, and it just plays quite differently in general. But what's still there in this game is the thrill of escaping as a Class D, the triumph of being the person to take down an SCP, and the excitement of finally getting to play as an SCP. No matter what role I'm given, I can have fun with it. Sometimes, though, it's not so fun. Guns seem really easy to obtain in this game. Like, as a scientist, there's a pretty high chance you're gonna run into a Class D with a gun, or vice versa, within the first few minutes of the game, and have your run cut very short. Maybe that's just a skill issue on my part, but it doesn't really feel very fair. On the whole, though, this game was fun. There are only a few moments here and there that don't feel very rewarding or fun. So I'll give it a 9 out of 10. For atmosphere, I'm not gonna lie, it definitely leaves a lot to be desired. The rooms look decently good. I mean, I like the way they're designed for the most part, but I feel like the lighting is pretty flat in most areas, unfortunately. There are some good examples of good lighting, though. I really like this area that transitions between the entrance zone and the heavy containment zone. Also, I'm not sure if others have experienced this, but there's this weird visual bug where the lighting goes super dark for a few seconds after spawning or entering a new area, and it's really obstructive. For the SCP design, we see a choice being made. I talked much earlier in this video about how it's difficult to make scary-looking monsters in the Roblox style, and in this game they seem to address that by not even slightly attempting to make the SCPs look scary or realistic. In fact, some of them, like 173 and 096, look straight up cartoony. It's definitely a distinctive style, I'm just not a fan of it. The music and sound design are pretty good. I kinda wish there was more ambient music. There's special music for every faction spawn wave and the nuke sequence, but when there's nothing happening, there's just no music. I'll give it a 5 out of 10. I want to like the atmosphere in this game, but I just feel like there's a lot of room for improvement, and the consistent presence of visual glitches brings this down as well. And finally, the SCP score is getting a 10. Now, I didn't have time to research every single SCP in this game, but I did look into some of the major ones, such as SCP-457, a being of pure fire which cannot take direct physical damage, but instead works on a fuel system. Basically, he loses fuel every second, but he can get more fuel by dealing damage. Of course, he'll also lose fuel if you shoot him, so guns aren't completely useless against him, but you won't be technically damaging him. His health only goes down once he runs out of fuel. Then there's SCP-1770, a humanoid made out of steel chains that can turn players into instances of SCP-1770-1, beings covered in chains that are controlled by SCP-1770. In-game, he works sorta like 049, but even more powerful, as he converts anyone instantly upon killing them. However, instances of SCP-1770-1 will lose health slowly if they are too far away from SCP-1770. Geez, I'm tired of saying that. I really like seeing representation of SCPs that we don't usually see in these types of SCP games, especially playable ones, so these were pretty cool to see. Overall, I thought the SCPs were implemented really well. That's an overall score of 24. Another game on the pile of A tiers. Before we get to the final game, I want to apologize to this guy who suggested I play Facility Lockdown. I really wanted to cover it, but unfortunately, as you said yourself, this game is kinda dead, so I couldn't really get anything out of it. With that being said, my list of suggested games is done. But as I said at the start of this video, I'm very curious as to the popular SCP games that weren't suggested. And also, the tier rankings haven't been very diverse so far, if you know what I mean. So, let's get into it. Yes, that's really the title of the game. It's one of the most popular SCP games by far, and is frequently the top result if you just look up SCP in the Roblox search function. Just look at these glowing reviews by people in the comments of the game's trailer. If this game is so popular and beloved, then why wasn't this suggested? Well, let's find out.
Excuse me, what the actual fuck are you doing in my house?
Attention. Doctor. Maynard. Report to.
Huh? Huh?
yeah, I think this game kind of speaks for itself. So this game essentially functions as a showcase for different SCPs, and sometimes things that are not SCPs. The
Gameplay
of this game consists of going around an SCP site to different SCP chambers and seeing what each SCP does. That's quite literally it. I mean, you could also shoot them, I guess. They just respawn immediately though, so I'm not really sure what the point of that is. Sometimes there are random events where a monster or UFO will spawn at the front gate. They don't really do much of anything besides walk towards the gate and then get stuck. But it's something that happens at least.
guys.
Guys?
So, I'm at a loss for words, honestly. This is really the most nothing game I've ever seen. Like, sure, it technically has a lot of things to do, but most SCP encounters just amount to monster walking towards you in a straight line. I know, this is like the shortest explanation segment ever, but I don't really think there's much to explain. I mean, you can customize your character in this room, so that's kinda cool. Okay, it's time for the score. For the gameplay score, you know what, I'm not gonna give it a 0 or even a 1, I'll give it a 2. Even if this game is 1,000 free models slapped together, there are worse Roblox experiences out there, so I have to cut this game a little bit of slack. There are game passes, but they aren't exorbitantly priced, and more importantly, they're not in your face all the time, unlike some other games. And even though I think pretty much every SCP was poorly and or lazily implemented, it was kind of fun going around and seeing all the different SCPs. Just the pure chaos of this game can be a little fun sometimes. Now, that's not to say that it makes for an interesting gameplay experience, though. I could not play this game for more than an hour. But that 1 hour would be kinda interesting, so I have to give it some points. For atmosphere, well, just look at it. As far as I can tell, all the assets are either stolen or incredibly basic. The outside area looks not horrible, though, so I suppose that saves it from being a 0. I'm still gonna give it a 1, though. The SCP score? Siren Head is not an SCP. The backrooms are not an SCP. And as I said earlier, each SCP is implemented pretty poorly. But there are a lot of SCPs represented. And, okay, I'll say this. Even though I've said a lot of bad things about this game, I don't think this game is made for me. I'm sure I was the oldest person playing by at least a decade. This game was basically the bacon hair convention, and when it comes to introducing literal babies to the SCP universe, well, I think it probably serves that role well enough. And just for that, I guess I can bump the SCP score to a 3. That's a total score of 6, which is lower than most single categories get, but it's not nothing. Like I said, this game isn't for me, and that's okay. And in many ways, I think I see the next lowest rated game in a similar way, that of course being Site-76. This was also the most popular SCP game for a time, and I think that it also serves as a pretty decent introduction to the SCP universe for what it is, even if I think there are some more refined SCP experiences out there. Overall, if I had to recommend only one of these games, it would be SCP Roleplay. It's by far the most accurate SCP game I've played, and the gameplay is actually fun too. At least when you level up a bit. Starting off is a bit slow. This whole project was fun, but I'm not sure I'm gonna do anything like it ever again. I don't think I'm cut out to be a reviewer. I think what this video taught me is that I enjoy analyzing much more than critiquing. With all that being said, I hope you enjoyed the video, and...
You said you'd do more?
What? When did I say that?
Literally at the start of the video.
So, I also went looking for some more popular ones that weren't mentioned. And, we'll get to those once. No. I don't want to play any more games. I'm done. Wait, what's happening? What? Okay, fine. I'll do some more games, but we're gonna make each review really quick. Bro, what is that thumbnail? SCP Defense at the Door, God, I can't believe I'm doing this, is a base defense game where you have to defend your base from an angry SCP-096. You do this by building and upgrading various things. The most important thing is your door, which 096 will beat down until it breaks down, and you'll lose. Luckily, you have a button to repair it, but if your door isn't a high enough level, you won't be able to out-repair the damage. But you don't just have to sit there and take it, you can fight back with turrets. These can also be upgraded to do more damage. After you do enough damage to 096, he'll eventually run away to SCP-999, get healed by it, and come running back. To get the resources to build and upgrade these things, you'll have to build and upgrade generators that create these things. This is essentially a resource management game. Knowing what to put your resources into at what time is the key to winning. And that's basically it. There's 3 different difficulties, but they pretty much just make 096 stronger. For the gameplay score, I was actually going to give this a pretty decent score, as it had better gameplay than I was expecting for a game of this quality. But the whole time I had this sinking feeling that this game was a remake of another game with just SCP slapped onto it. And as it turns out, I was right. This game is based on Ghost at the Door, which has the exact same mechanics, except Ghost at the Door is way more polished and just better in general, which pretty much means this game is just a rip-off of that game with SCP added onto it to get some SCP fans to play it. Due to that, I can't give it a good score. 3 out of 10 for gameplay. There might be much worse games out there gameplay-wise, but like, just play Ghost at the Door. There's no reason to play this. And the atmosphere is, not great. Everything looks really basic, 096 himself looks kinda goofy, and there's barely any music, and the sound effects are pretty basic. I guess I like how the outskirts of the map look though, so that saves it a bit. 3 out of 10. And for the SCP score, I said this at the start of the video, but it really rubs me the wrong way when it seems like SCP is just being added to a game for people to click onto it, with no respect given to the actual SCP universe. And just so I don't have to say it every time, this is going to become a common theme in the Gauntlet. SCP-096 is kind of treated like a generic scary monster in this game. He just walks up to your door, starts beating it down, and then runs away to SCP-999. I mean, would SCP-999 even heal 096 if it knew it would lead to lots of people dying? I don't think so. If anything, it would try to pacify 096. So yeah, absolutely zero respect for the SCP universe, and frankly, zero respect for the creators of the Ghost at the Door too. 0 respect means 0 out of 10 for the SCP score. Oh boy, yeah, this is your typical tycoon game with SCP slapped onto it. Get money, use money to make more money, use more money to make more money, use more money to buy walls and weapons, dress up as an SCP, and terrorize the babies playing this game. The gameplay is the exact same as every other tycoon game. And I'll be honest, I used to spend all my time playing tycoon games back when I was a kid, so I kinda get it. Number go up and all. And running around stabbing kids, maybe I should rephrase that, going around stabbing noobs was fun. But I'm not just gonna sit here and act like tycoon games are worth your time at all. But 1 out of 10. I think a game basically has to ruin my day to get a 0 in this category. Speaking of zeros, just take a listen to the beautiful sounds of this game. Zero out of 10 for atmosphere. And I don't think I'll be shocking anyone when I say 0 out of 10 for the SCP score. The SCPs in this game are relegated to morphs. And it's kind of sad, because I feel like you could actually make a halfway decent SCP Tycoon if you made each one specialized to its actual SCP lore. Oh well. In this game, you can become SCP-096. Yeah, the title tells you everything you need to know, basically. Well, I guess you could also be a human and run from all the shy guys running around, but why would you do that? There are various human NPCs around for you to kill. It's actually kind of fun. Now, I'm really trying to not let the recent games distort my perspective of what a good game is. This is not a game I could come back to every day and put hours into kind of fun, but as a one-off experience, it was decently entertaining going around killing people as 096. So, 3 out of 10 for gameplay. Atmosphere, though... not so great. 0 out of 10 again. But for the SCP score, I might just give it a 4. It understands how 096 works, at least. Nothing strikes me as especially egregious in how SCP-096 is represented. It is still kind of lazy, but it's not the insulting kind of lazy. This is a game... Hold on, that doesn't sound right. This is a thing. You're on a boat, and sometimes creatures spawn in the water. Sometimes those things are vaguely SCP-related. There's also an SCP site on this island here, home to such SCPs as 173, 162, this train thing, Shrek! Also, supposedly there's a way to get to the back rooms, but when I tried it, I just got stuck. Oh, and don't let this gun fool you. It does absolutely nothing. Oh, also, you can be an SCP for that much Robux. So, yeah, for the score, actually, I think it's perfect. I don't need to change anything here. Seriously, the most enjoyable experience that I got out of playing this game was the laugh I got when I saw Shrek. Do I really need to keep doing these? Okay, fine. This is SCP in the back rooms. Again, the title tells you everything you need to know. You can't even escape the back room, so I'm not really sure what the point is. Well, I mean, you kind of can, because you can jump out of the map here, but I don't think that was intentional. Again, zeros all across the board. I really don't have the energy to even entertain the idea of giving these slop games any credit. They made a sequel? Why would they make a sequel? Why is Bendy in the thumbnail? The gameplay is fundamentally the same as the first game, just looks a bit better now. Well, actually, I kind of feel like this is a downgrade from the first game in every aspect except appearance. I don't know if I can explain why exactly, but it feels like it lost a bit of the chaos factor that made the original kind of fun. And this one has more prominent game passes. Also some completely meaningless mechanics as well. 2 out of 10 for gameplay. Atmosphere, though, I'll give it a 4. Look, I said it was an upgrade from the original, but not that it was good. It's still incredibly basic, but there's some good lighting and even ambiance now. SCP score, 1 out of 10. It could be slightly worse, I guess. And at least we're not in the back rooms this time. I just don't really want to play a game like this again. And oh, come on! You're not even trying anymore! I am genuinely so tired of these crappy, low-effort games, if you can even call them games, which I don't think you even can. They don't even qualify! Lastly, I just want to say that I'm not trying to crap on anyone's game here. Game development is not easy. I don't care about that anymore! I just want to be done with this! I'm really starting to see what those commenters meant.
Yeah, I said I wanted to find out, and here I am, finding out. Are you happy now? Are you happy? I hope you're happy! Well, I'm done dealing with this. No more! I made this one. Do you like it? I think it's the best one. It's not only the best SCP Roblox game, it's the best SCP game. No, it's the best game of all time. Can't be beaten. There, you happy now?